They say the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is the cost of speaking that truth when no one wants to hear it. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the people you're trying to save will be the ones who destroy you for trying. This is the story of a woman who saw everything while pretending to see nothing. A woman who spent 3 years living as a ghost in her own home, watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. A woman who gathered evidence that no one would believe, who spoke truths that everyone dismissed as lies, who sacrificed everything to save the one person she loved most in the world. Her name was Celestine Hawthorne, and by the time you finish hearing her story, you'll be forced to answer a question that will haunt you. If you knew the truth could destroy your relationship with the person you love most, would you still speak it? If you could save someone's life but lose them forever in the process, would you do it? Before we begin, let me warn you, this isn't a story with easy answers. This isn't a story where the hero wins and everyone lives happily ever after. This is a story about the brutal cost of being right when everyone thinks you're wrong, about the loneliness of seeing danger that no one else can see, about a mother's love pushed to its absolute breaking point. The amber glow of dawn crept through gauze curtains, painting elongated shadows across the mahogany floor. Celestine Hawthorne sat motionless in her wheelchair, positioned at her customary spot by the bay window, a ritual she'd maintained for precisely 1,247 days. Her clouded azure eyes appeared vacant, unfocused, staring at nothing. A deliberate tremor animated her pale hands resting on worn armrests, and a thin strand of saliva glistened at her lips' corner, a cruel detail she'd perfected through countless hours of practice. To any observer, Celestine embodied tragedy incarnate, blind, deaf, cognitively absent. But behind those manufactured cataracts, her mind operated with surgical precision, cataloging footsteps, whispers, movements, every secret that drifted through the Thornwood residence she'd inhabited for 9 years. The truth? Celestine could see everything, hear everything, and what she witnessed was methodically destroying her from within. At 6:47 a.m., her son Dashiell entered the kitchen. She recognized his gait intimately, the slight drag of his left foot when exhausted, the metallic jingle of keys against his thigh. At 42, Dashiell had constructed what appeared to be an exemplary life, a thriving forensic accounting practice, an elegant home, a marriage he believed was anchored in devotion. But Celestine knew better. She always knew better. Behind him glided Octavia Merriweather, Dashiell's wife of 7 years. She moved with choreographed fluidity, every gesture calculated. At 34, Octavia possessed the kind of beauty that stopped conversations mid-sentence. Cascading obsidian hair, luminous skin, a silk robe cinched to accentuate curves, she was perfection personified. Burgundy nails clicked against marble as she approached Dashiell, her voice dripping honey. "Good morning, darling. Did you finish the garrison account?" Dashiell embraced her. Almost 2 more hours of review. Tonight, Octavia's voice shifted imperceptibly, a tightening jaw, fingers pressing harder into his shoulders. "I hoped we'd spend the evening together." "Of course," Dashiell said, oblivious. "I'll make that risotto you love." Octavia smiled, but the warmth never reached her eyes. Turning toward the espresso machine, her expression transformed, cold, calculating, predatory. It lasted mere seconds, but Celestine caught it. She'd become an expert at invisibility while seeing everything. 3 years prior, Celestine had suffered a genuine stroke, partial paralysis, impaired speech, 6 months of agonizing rehabilitation. But as her physical recovery progressed, she'd made a calculated decision: maintain the disability's appearance, deepen the affectation until it became her second skin. People grew careless around the disabled. They spoke freely, shared secrets, moved through life as though sightless eyes couldn't observe and deaf ears couldn't hear. Celestine had learned something crucial in 68 years. The best way to protect those you love is knowing the truth about those around them. A lesson learned through devastating heartbreak when her husband, Thaddeus Sinclair, had revealed himself to be a charlatan living multiple lives, other women, hidden families, buried crimes. The divorce had annihilated her. Worse than the financial ruin was realizing she'd been completely blind to the truth. So enamored, she'd ignored every warning sign. She'd sworn never to be blind again. When Dashiell met Octavia, Celestine desperately wanted to be wrong. Octavia seemed perfect, attentive, affectionate, respectful. She'd even suggested Celestine move into their guest house, framing it as filial devotion. Dashiell had been so grateful, so touched by his wife's compassion. But Celestine noticed things immediately. The smile that faltered when unobserved, hours locked in the study, fingers flying across keyboards, late-night phone calls whispered with inappropriate intimacy, credit cards in unmarked envelopes, accounts never discussed. Then came the day of Celestine's stroke. As she lay hospitalized, partially paralyzed, she'd watched Octavia's face transform. When unattended, greed, calculation, cold assessment. Octavia saw her as an obstacle, not a person. That's when Celestine decided to become a ghost in her own life. The perfect cover. The morning continued its predictable rhythm. Dashiell left for his downtown office, blissfully unaware of the tempest brewing beneath his roof. Celestine waited until his car disappeared before allowing her expression to shift. The house fell silent except for the refrigerator's hum and the grandfather clock's ticking. Octavia moved briskly now that Dashiell was gone, entering the study and locking the door. Something new she'd started doing recently. Celestine waited 10 minutes, then moved. Her supposedly paralyzed right hand gripped the wheelchair's armrest with surprising strength. Her useless legs pushed forward with purpose. She'd never hidden her mobility when alone, no point, but was meticulous about leaving no evidence. She positioned herself near the study door and listened. "He doesn't suspect anything." Octavia's voice penetrated the oak door. "He's completely in the dark. The liquidation is almost complete. We should have the bulk transferred by month's end. Then the only issue is the inheritance. Once his mother is gone, we'll have complete control." Celestine's breath caught. Once his mother is gone. The words hung like a curse. "I'm not suggesting anything dramatic," Octavia continued, amusement in her voice. "She's already half dead anyway. At her age, with her condition, it wouldn't take much. A slip in the bathroom, an allergic reaction. These things happen." The call ended. Celestine backed away silently, hands trembling, returning to her station by the window, but her mind raced. For 3 years, she'd been documenting Octavia's activities. She'd photographed her meeting a man in hotel parking lots, images captured with a telephoto lens she'd mastered despite her supposed disability. She had bank statements showing systematic fund transfers totaling hundreds of thousands. But now she understood the scope. This wasn't just infidelity or theft. Octavia was conspiring to rob Dashiell blind, steal his inheritance, and possibly hasten Celestine's death to access the family trust. The man on the phone, Celestine had identified him through painstaking research, Percival Blackwood, a businessman whose name appeared in court documents and police reports. Twice arrested for fraud, both cases dismissed on technicalities, accused of embezzlement, rumored connections to organized crime. Most disturbing, his first wife had disappeared 5 years ago under unexplained circumstances. Celestine realized she needed irrefutable evidence. She needed to tell Dashiell. The following weeks became an exercise in careful documentation. Celestine followed Octavia more frequently, always invisible, always cautious. She discovered Octavia and Percival meeting twice weekly at a luxury hotel where discretion was assured. More importantly, she discovered documents. Following Octavia to a private mailbox facility, Celestine memorized the code by watching over her shoulder. Later, she accessed the mailbox herself, finding a treasure trove. Real estate deeds to properties worth millions, bought under untraceable LLCs. Account statements showing systematic emptying of Dashiell's joint accounts. A detailed plan in Octavia's handwriting outlining timelines for theft and disposal of the obstacle. Celestine herself. But there was something else that froze her blood. A life insurance policy on Dashiell for $10 million, dated 3 months after their marriage, with Octavia as beneficiary. Dashiell didn't know. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about theft. This was about systematic destruction and possibly murder. As Celestine sat by the window maintaining her pretense, she felt knowledge pressing down like physical weight. She had to tell Dashiell, had to make him understand. But would he believe her? That evening, when Dashiell returned home, Celestine made her decision. She could no longer maintain her facade. Dashiell, she called out, her voice clear and strong for the first time in 3 years. We need to talk, right now, about your wife. Dashiell turned, confusion washing over his face. He'd never heard her speak like this, without slurred speech, without hesitation. Mother, what's happening? Everything, Celestine said, tears forming. Everything is wrong, Dashiell, and I need you to listen without interrupting, without defending her, without making excuses. Your life depends on it. She told him everything, showed him screenshots on her laptop, emails, financial transfers, the forged insurance policy. She explained the coded messages, each phase of the operation. She told him about following Octavia, about overhearing the conversation with Percival, about hearing them discuss murdering them both. As she spoke, she watched her son's face transform. Confusion to shock, shock to disbelief, disbelief to something resembling denial. She watched love for his wife war against evidence of betrayal. When she finished, silence stretched endlessly. Finally, Dashiell spoke. You're lying. His voice sounded hollow, broken. You're making this up because you're jealous, because you don't think anyone is good enough for me. I'm not lying, Celestine said desperately. Look at this, Dashiell. Look at the insurance policy. Look at the emails. Look at the bank statements. You could have forged these, Dashiell said, voice rising. You've been pretending to be disabled for 3 years, Mother. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm telling you the truth. Because I love you. Because I'm trying to save your life. You're trying to destroy my marriage, Dashiell said, standing. I don't know what's wrong with you, but this ends now. I won't hear any more of this. I think you need professional help, Mother. Psychiatric evaluation. Your stroke may have caused more damage than anyone realized. Dashiell, please. No. He cut her off firmly. I'm done. He turned and left the house. He'd rejected everything, chosen to believe his wife over his mother, decided that the woman he loved was more trustworthy than the woman who'd raised him. Celestine sat alone with evidence no one would believe, realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. She'd revealed her knowledge, shown her hand, and instead of saving him, she'd accelerated the timeline for her own death. The following morning, Dashiell returned with Octavia, her hand linked through his arm, expression serene. We need to talk, Dashiell said, his voice harder now. My wife has told me everything. Celestine's stomach dropped. She told me you've been spying on her. Dashiell continued, voice trembling, going through her personal files, creating fake documents to frame her. She says you've been consumed with jealousy and paranoia, that you've lost touch with reality. That's not true, Celestine said, voice shaking. Dashiell, I have evidence. I don't want to see your evidence, Dashiell interrupted. I've made my decision. My wife is a good woman. She loves me. I'm disgusted by what you've done, pretending to be disabled so you could spy on my marriage. That's a fundamental betrayal of trust. Herbert, please. Stop, Octavia interjected, placing her hand on Dashiell's arm with wounded hurt. This is what I was afraid of. I can't stay silent anymore. I can't let her continue making these accusations. Dashiell wrapped his arm around Octavia protectively, and Celestine watched her son choose his wife over his mother. Your mother needs help, Octavia said softly. Professional psychiatric care. She needs to leave this house. She's become a danger to both of us. I agree, Dashiell said, pain evident in his voice. You need to pack your things. I'm arranging for you to move into a care facility. You'll have enough money to live comfortably, but you're not living in this house anymore. And frankly, I think separation might help you get the psychological help you need. I don't need psychological help, Celestine said, voice rising. I need you to believe me. Your wife is a criminal. Enough, Dashiell said firmly. I've made up my mind. You have until tomorrow morning to pack. After that, I don't want you to contact me. Our relationship is over, Mother, at least for now. Celestine felt physically struck. Her own son was ejecting her, believing a criminal's lies over his mother's truth. "Please," she whispered, "please don't do this." But Dashiell had turned away, holding Octavia close, deliberately ignoring his mother as though she'd ceased to exist. Octavia looked back over her shoulder, and Celestine saw victory in her eyes. She'd won. She'd successfully isolated Dashiell from the one person who could save him. Celestine moved into a modest third-floor apartment on the city's outskirts. Broken elevators, hallways smelling of mildew and despair. A far cry from comfortable living, but all she could afford. A place where she could disappear, wait, watch, and hope somehow the truth would eventually emerge. The weeks became the darkest of her life. She had evidence proving Octavia's guilt, but no way to present it to anyone who'd listen. Police wouldn't investigate without Dashiell's cooperation, and he was completely under Octavia's control. Months passed. Celestine lived surrounded by evidence of crimes no one would acknowledge. She kept her laptop secure, files backed up, detailed notes of everything discovered. She monitored Octavia's activities from a distance, tracking movements, documenting meetings with Percival, keeping records of every transfer and communication. But it was futile, simply chronicling a conspiracy she had no power to stop. Then, 6 months after ejection from Dashiell's home, something unexpected happened. The federal government moved in. Detective Marcellus Kane, who'd been monitoring Percival Blackwood's criminal activities for years, had finally gathered enough evidence. Armed agents descended on buildings where Percival's operations were based. Bank accounts froze, property seized. Within days, both Octavia and Percival were arrested and charged with multiple federal crimes: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. Celestine learned about the arrests watching Dashiell's face on local news. He was being interviewed about crimes his wife had committed: the forged insurance policy, the drained offshore accounts. His face was a mask of shock and devastation as he came to terms with the fact that his mother had been right all along. The news report also mentioned that federal investigators had found evidence of another woman murdered by Percival Blackwood, a woman named Catherine Sheffield, who disappeared 5 years earlier. Her body had been found buried on one of Percival's properties. As Celestine watched, she felt complex emotions. Vindication, she'd been right, but also profound sadness. The vindication meant nothing. It didn't bring back months Dashiell spent defending his wife, months believing his mother was insane. It didn't undo the damage. The following day, a knock came at Celestine's door. She opened it to find her son standing in the hallway. He looked broken, eyes red from crying, clothes hanging loosely, suggesting significant weight loss. "I'm sorry," Dashiell said without preamble. "I'm so sorry, Mother. You were right about everything. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. I chose to believe her instead of you." Celestine moved aside, letting her son enter. He sank into the worn chair beside her window. For several moments, neither spoke. There were no adequate words. Too much pain, too much betrayal, too much lost time. "How did you find out?" Celestine finally asked. "Federal agents came to the house," Dashiell said, voice hollow. "Served us with a search warrant. Took Octavia away in handcuffs. Only then did I finally understand. The evidence was right there in their case files. Screenshots, emails, the forged insurance policy. Everything you told me was real." "I tried to show you," Celestine said gently. "I know," Dashiell said, tears streaming. "I called you paranoid, jealous. Let her convince me you were unstable, that I needed to get you out of my life. And she was the threat all along." Dashiell looked around the small apartment, taking in worn furniture, unpacked boxes, modest conditions. "You've been living here all this time, while I was at home with her. You were here alone." "Yes," Celestine said simply. "I spent the time documenting everything. I knew eventually the truth would come to light. I just didn't expect it to take so long." Dashiell reached out and took his mother's hand for the first time since his marriage to Octavia. He held his mother's hand as if she was the most important person in the world. "What happens now?" Celestine asked. The federal government is building a case, Dashiell said. Octavia is looking at 30 to 40 years. Percival is looking at life. They found evidence of multiple murders, multiple fraud schemes stretching back decades. Thanks to you, the case is very strong. And us? Celestine asked. What happens to us? Dashiell was quiet before answering. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive myself for not listening. I don't know if I can ever make up for the months you spent alone, but I'm going to try. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to make it right. There's nothing to make right, Celestine said, squeezing his hand. You were blinded by love. That's not a character flaw. It's human. The important thing is that you see the truth now. But even as she spoke, Celestine understood things could never be the same. The betrayal had left scars. The months of separation had created distance that couldn't be completely bridged. The trial that followed became a media sensation. The story of a woman carefully orchestrating her husband's asset theft while planning his murder captured public imagination. Details of crimes were laid out for the world to see, and with each revelation, Dashiell's shame grew deeper. Celestine attended the trial, sitting in the gallery, watching as Octavia was convicted on all counts. She watched as the judge pronounced the sentence, 45 years in federal prison, possibility of parole after 30. As Octavia was led away, she looked back at her mother-in-law, and Celestine saw something almost resembling respect in those eyes. Months following the trial were difficult as Dashiell tried piecing his life together. He'd lost a marriage, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The naive belief that loved ones wouldn't betray him. He had to rebuild from ashes. But slowly, gradually, he and Celestine began rebuilding their relationship. Dashiell moved his mother into a new home, not the original house with its memories and ghosts, but a new space where they could begin again. Years passed. Celestine grew older, and events of those dark months became part of her history. She spent her final years with Dashiell, watched him rebuild, eventually find love again with a woman named Serafina, kind, genuine, nothing like Octavia. She attended her son's wedding, and when she looked at Dashiell on his wedding day, she saw something missing for a long time: genuine happiness. As Celestine watched her son exchange vows, she thought back to the moment of revelation when he'd refused to believe her, ejected her from his home. She thought about the cost of being right when no one believed you, the price of truth delivered by someone no one trusted. She thought about all the pain that could have been avoided if Dashiell had simply listened. But she also understood something else. Sometimes truth requires sacrifice. Sometimes protecting those you love means doing things that hurt them, make them doubt you, force them to question everything. Sometimes the only way to save someone is being willing to lose them first. In her final months, when Celestine knew her time was ending, she called Dashiell to her bedside. Her body had finally caught up with the disability she'd performed for so long. I need you to know something, Celestine said, voice weak but clear. Everything I did because I loved you. Not because I was jealous or paranoid. Because I loved you, and I could not stand by and watch someone destroy you. I know, Mother, Dashiell said, tears streaming. I wish I'd known it then, but I know it now. Being right doesn't make you feel victorious, Celestine continued. Being right when everyone thinks you're wrong is lonely, painful, a burden that weighs on you every day. If you ever find yourself having to choose between protecting someone you love and being believed, choose protection every time. A life saved is worth more than a reputation defended. Dashiell held his mother's hand as she faded, held it as she took her last breath, held it long after she'd gone. In that moment, he understood fully the sacrifice his mother had made, the pain she'd endured,